Everyone, we're here at CPAC talking with Devin Nunes with the House Intelligence Committee. And Devin Nunes, real pleasure having you on Crossroads.
Well, it's great to be here. I kind of feel like a reporter with this thing and this mic in my hand.
Yeah, well, so some breaking news on that note. We've all heard the news about Durham and his alleged report coming out with the Crossfire Hurricane investigations, and we've seen now that he seemed to have relieved himself of being an attorney, but this may not end the investigation. So where are things at?
So he's the U.S. attorney in Connecticut, or until the 28th. So he announced that he was retiring from that today. So there's been a little confusion. As of now, we don't believe that he has quit entirely, and he will stay as special counsel to oversee this investigation of the Russia hoax.
Now, with that whole thing, a lot of people are wondering what Durham's up to. Have you heard anything and what's going on with him? Any rumors? Everyone kind of feels like Durham just kind of was put there and just kind of abandoned.
Well, the good news is that there's not a lot of rumors. Now, part of that is because the fake news, complex, they're not actually doing their job. They're not trying to actually go and talk to all their sources that they have at the FBI and DOJ. So everybody's mum, everybody's quiet. And of course, Durham's doing, I think, a professional job because he hasn't leaked. Now, the key will be if he brings indictments, will the but the Biden DOJ, it's effectively the same thing, are they going to actually bring these prosecutions with if they get a grand jury indictment? And then, of course, we need to not only see that, but we need to have we need to have a report on everything that happened and everybody that was involved in this, so that we can put some closure to this and move forward, because there still has not been a recognition by the media in this country, major institutions here, the FBI itself, the Department of Justice, that there's some serious issues here moving forward that have been occurring now since 2015, when this operation was first started, where they essentially allowed political opposition research to turn into basically essentially fake research, planted stories, total corruption within the FBI and the DOJ. And if this doesn't get fixed, you're going to continue to see like what you see all over CPAC here, which are people coming up to me, continually saying, "Is anything going to happen? This is so wrong. What happened to?" Everybody thinks it wasn't just like Donald Trump. I mean, this was really an attack on the Republican Party and weaponization of our intelligence services. You guys at Epoch Times have done a lot to cover this over the last few years. So
yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, and I hear a lot of this too. People are really wondering what's happening, and it seems to be the case that it's impacting people's faith in the government itself at this point. But because they're saying, are there two sets of laws in this country? Applied based on which party you're with, where
right.
Conservatives were getting thrown in, through the ringers essentially for lying under oath, sometimes on very kind of funky grounds with that. Whereas based on even leaked documents, you had a lot of people on the other side lying under oath and possibly committing pretty serious crimes with this whole scandal. Yeah.
No, there's no question. There was a whole bunch of people that were framed in this Russia hoax. They were never busted for doing anything with Russia. It was all process stuff or things that had occurred before, which is not okay. And they were vilified, in the media by their political opponents, and in many cases prosecuted. The good thing was, at least, that Donald Trump, I was very happy to see the president pardon everybody that was caught up in this hoax. So that was a good thing that he was able to do when he was going out of office.
Now, you were, of course, one of the first people who was really attacked with this, too, because, you were with the House Intelligence Committee. You were really trying to just kind of do your job, it seems, now looking back. And, look, folks, we can say that this whole thing, leaked documents, actually declassified documents at this point, really demonstrate that the whole thing was a hoax. Yeah. But you were deeply attacked by this, and, you were kind of put in the spotlight. And that was during a time when the facts really weren't out yet, and so I assume there was a lot of confusion. What was that like?
Well, look, it continues to this day, right? It's the same challenges that we have, that narratives continue to get spun up and created, made up out of whole cloth, and then you're targeted. And, that's the challenge. You could kind of see, a lot of this violence that had been occurring, it really started 4 years ago. Because, anybody that popped their head up to say, whoa, wait a second here, I don't see any evidence of the Russians colluding with Republicans to, take over an election. And immediately I was attacked, and anybody surrounding me, from my staff to my family to my extended family to anybody who I had ever done business with. So yeah, it's obviously very concerning, and look, there's a collapse of institutions across this country.
Now, a lot of people are wondering what's going to happen with this. If Durham actually does come out with this report that he's supposed to come out with, and still being a special counsel, what are the chances that there are actually being prosecutions at this point under Biden?
Well, look, we've made over a dozen criminal referrals. I'd be very disappointed if those weren't acted on, and involving dozens and dozens of people. So hopefully they can bring some indictments. Especially to, the people who, should have known better, and that's really these institutions like the FBI, where you had these people who not only had to have known that this was occurring, number one, and then number two, had to know that this was being spun up by the Democrats. They were leaking. They were causing all of these problems, and knowing that it was happening.
And the other big side of this too is, as you were mentioning, it's really impacting. A lot of people are wondering what's going to happen. Is anything going to happen? And it's become a political issue when in reality, I think for a lot of people, this is an issue of whether the intelligence agencies in this country can basically violate the law, interfere with politics, and essentially, cripple an administration throughout the entire 4 years, essentially, run by lies.
Right.
And, will this happen again if it's not dealt with? What are your thoughts about this?
I think it's happening. I think because of what they started to do back in, well, first of all, they probably got away with this when they were targeting during the Obama years, and they were able to cover up the targeting of conservative groups, including CPAC, by the way, by the IRS. So that was probably the beginning of this. They got away with that. They got away with Benghazi and the lies there. And then they got away with targeting the Republican Party with fake and phony information, and so we've just degraded since then, since that point. And it continues to happen.
Yeah, and we're seeing now some of this with censorship. Of course, theme of this year at CPAC, lo and behold, is America, America uncanceled. And so this cancel culture is coming in the spotlight. And yeah, some of the things you're seeing right now is people being censored by big tech, censored if they want to talk about what happened in the elections, and then really legitimate concerns about election integrity. Can't talk about it. And if you say anything that challenges essentially the established narrative on the virus or the way things are being handled, can't talk about it either. And so big tech is now pushing on this. So what's being done to push back against big tech?
So that's probably the biggest problem that we face right now in this country as a party is censorship. And it's mainly because we don't have a communications architecture anymore. We have no way to communicate. So the challenge will be that, except for like ghettos of the internet, right? So we have a few places that we can do interviews on, like yours and your podcast and your video cast. But I think last time I checked, I think YouTube was demonetizing you, right?
Yeah.
As I recall. And so, there's Rumble that's out there that's an alternative. You had Parler, which it's now a verb. They got parlered by Apple and Amazon and completely wiped off the face of the planet. And, and that's going to be kind of the next concern. At what point, I have my little podcast that I do to reach, my little people that I can get to and my supporters. Well, what happens when this doesn't, when they take and wipe out iTunes? iTunes says, we don't want any conservatives on iTunes. Are they going to cancel Dan Bongino, Ben Shapiro? Who's next? These up-and-coming podcasters that have hundreds of thousands of followers. That's what's probably coming, and so we're in for a long fight. And people are asking, well, what can we do? You have to tell your congressmen and your senators that this has to end, so that pressure comes onto these tech oligarchs, because that's essentially what they are. And then also at the state legislative level, these state legislatures are going to have to pass new laws, like Governor DeSantis was talking about today, about how to take and end. If you're going to censor somebody, you're going to be fined in the state of Florida. So hopefully that can pass.
And the other big side of this is, media really just lying about people.
Yeah.
I mean, really, this whole Trump-Russia thing now, a lot of it, almost all of it was lies at this point. The whole, the dossier they had released, the Steele dossier, I mean, the whole thing is debunked. It was a lie. Yeah. Not only that, but financed.
Well, and the impeachment was a lie. Yes. The Ukraine impeachment. I mean, it's just, the whole thing was crazy.
Which does bring up the other side of this, too, which is media and their ability to just lie about people and defame people. I know, actually, you've been kind of a target of this as well.
Yeah.
And I know you tried pushing back against some of this with CNN. You filed a defamation lawsuit, tossed out by the judge. Where is this at right now?
Well, look, we're continuing. So it's a long process, and I'm confident that at some point the courts are going to get this right, because they can't just allow these companies to write things that are patently false and knowingly false. And this was that's an interesting story, because that was one that was shopped around by political operatives at the height of the Ukraine impeachment, and they knew that their source was not credible because they had actually written about their source. So look, are we disappointed so far in the court system? But I will say this. It's not stopping my strategy. If you defame or slander me, you're going to end up in court, right? If you don't, remove it and take it down. So that's happening. So look, hopefully the appellate courts are going to begin, which has been happening a little bit. The appellate courts have been reversing some of these decisions. If you remember, one of the famous ones recently was Nicholas Sandmann, the young kid that was, supposedly was labeled a racist or whatever it was. Well, those cases originally got thrown out, but then the appellate court came back in, and eventually, he settled at least one of those cases, and that was 4 years ago. So, you just have to hope and pray that the court system itself, that institution, stands up. I know there's been some struggles, but hopefully they'll stand up, and hopefully they'll start to right this ship, where you're not going to just allow fake news stories to proliferate throughout the internet that are personal attacks on me and my family.
Now, what was the content of the CNN article that made you, decide to take this step with it?
Well, it was pretty simple. Well, one, we knew that it had been shopped by political operatives for many, many months. And two, they said that I was, this happened timed right at the height of the Ukraine impeachment hoax. And it was time to say that I was doing some nefarious work in Vienna, meeting with these dirty Russians and Ukrainian oligarch people. Okay, well, that's a nice sounding story, except that, I actually had evidence that I was actually in Libya. I was in Benghazi at the time they said that I was in Vienna. So it's pretty obvious that it's not true. I mean, I even have pictures. I mean, there's records of this. So, those are the types of things, and clearly that was done in order to maximize harm and discredit me and my role by saying that, oh, he knows all about this because he was over there doing this. He was involved in all this stuff, the stuff that they were making up, right, at the time that, supposedly people were over digging up dirt on the Bidens. And then lo and behold, it ends up being true. That's the funny thing about it. I didn't know it, but, now you look back, it ends up that indeed, Biden had very serious issues with Ukraine that is yet to be accounted for, and China for that matter, that, money was being moved. He got $4 million. His son got $4 million from the former mayor of Moscow's wife, that's a known oligarch and known to be corrupt and known to be tied to Russian intelligence services. Sound familiar? So it's whatever they accuse you of doing. They're the ones that were doing it. I mean, they're the ones that were in bed with Russian intelligence services, not Republicans, not Donald Trump. And so, for them to do that at the height, it was done maliciously. It was completely done to derail what we were doing in Congress. And that's what the courts they have to stop this. They can't continue to let this happen.
Now, what this all ties into, I think, is this other concerning picture that a lot of Americans are watching right now, which is they feel that there's a broader agenda behind all these attacks, behind all these movements, and they see this as really being tied to this push for socialist policy throughout the United States. We have, for example, this Equality Act. We have, for example, gun control, freedom of speech under assault. All these things coming through right now. You know, what is this? Is this
a $2 trillion bill that's coming down the pipeline right now that's designed supposedly for COVID. And it's nothing but all it is a grab bag and money that's going to be sitting there for Biden to use for the next 4 years to essentially buy people off and buy members of Congress off. We saw this back in 2009 when Obama came in and they said, oh, we have to pass this stimulus bill. Remember that? It ended up with cash for clunkers and all this other goofy stuff, Solyndra, and all this corruption. So they're using COVID to go borrow and print another $2 trillion so that they're going to have a slush fund that they admit most of this money is not going to be used this year or even next year. It's going to be used over the next 4 years. So they're doing this. It's a Trojan horse by design. They're trying to put a bunch of policy writers on there that they're going to do in the name of COVID, when we haven't even used the money that we just signed into law a little over a month ago, that Donald Trump signed on his way out of office back in December. Was, that money still hasn't been used. So yeah, they're definitely doing some bad policy. It's coming down.
Great. Devin Nunes, a real pleasure having you on Crossroads. Thank you.
Great to be with you. Thanks a lot for having me.